Management Advisory. Learning from COVID-19 challenges. With the pandemic in full flow, insurers are having to manage its implications across every part of their business. The need of the hour was to rapidly activate their crisis management plans to meet the immediate challenges for business continuity. The problem most corporations had was they had simulated plans and contingencies in place for natural disasters and terrorist attacks, but this was very different, and no simulation plans existed for a major pandemic with such different characteristics and scale. Thus, new plans had to be made, disruptions and their implications had to be understood, and systems addressing them had to be put in place virtually within 24 hours. Flexibility, leadership, reprioritization, communications, adaptability, redesigning operations, meeting new government requirements, easing organizations' own rules, and putting together an experienced crisis management team from most parts of the business was the call of the hour. A key challenge for leadership and HR teams was to optimize staff availability. Immediately there was an increase in staff absence as self-isolation took place. Many were shielding themselves, some staff were seriously ill, other staff were showing symptoms or were unwell. Other staff had to look after their children or elder parents, etc. The key issues were around understanding which staff were available with what experience and how to reallocate them from back end to the front end, as well as in changing process operations. Which staff to discontinue, which to furlough, which premises to shut, which to keep open with a skeleton staff and meeting new health and safety requirements, etc. Given the lockdowns and government advice, most staff had to be enabled to work remotely from home. All this also created a sense of growing uncertainty and anxiety. As government requirements around isolation came in place, remote working, especially working from home, became the current normal. This created challenges in communication. The need to scale large numbers of remote users meant drastic increases in provisions of VPNs, remote gateways, mobile devices, licenses, security solutions, video conferencing solutions, etc. It also meant evaluating each staff's remote condition and the provision of internet with fast bandwidth, and frequently supplying gateways, routers, laptops, tablets, provisioning IT support, ensuring staff to work from home, etc. This in turn created more supply chain problems around funding and billing authorizations, access to much needed applications, which if not provisioned then need to be quickly moved to the clouds, and authorizing other applications not normally allowed by businesses like messaging, chat and video comms. Companies got to understand the value of good cloud infrastructure and the ability to scale immediately. Company cultures also had to change overnight to adopt informality as people worked away from offices, including in leisurely dressing and interruptions from other family members and pets. Remote working has also brought its own set of risks. As more employees are required to work from home with relatively weaker IT security measures for now, there is increased exposure to cyber attacks and risks. The insurers already have measures for securing against cyber and IT attacks to their infrastructure, but now need to extend this to home and teleworkers, which were only provisioned for a lower number of critical staff. Questions around how secure were the remote networks, the devices, the home environments all led to questions around exposure and risk. Added to this is the need to open up the systems, processes and applications to more and more unauthorized stuff that now need provision to complete certain tasks. Ironically, this also leads to increased sales of cyber insurance as businesses identify it as a gap in their insurance cover, later covered in our special issue. Digitization has been a boon in the back end for most operators in terms of scaling quickly, but even more so in the front end. As lockdown and physical distancing have come into force, most new transactions and communications have had to move online and utilize various digital engagement channels. It also becomes easier to direct people online to appropriate information on a very quick and timely basis. However, not all companies had provision or expert people in place for this and are now quickly having to get used to deploying and using these applications. If utilized properly, these digital channels can not only reduce pressure on call centers and staff but can also become channels for profitable new business lines. The key, of course, is flexibility and agility in changing decades of habits, procedures and authorization powers overnight, breaking up processes and relying occasionally on fully digital transactions without any physical presence or signatures. Recently, we have just heard for the first time landing and other transactions processes done fully online without any physical touch, which was unheard of in the financial industry. Companies that are not fast in changing their procedures are finding it hard to recover as well as introduce new profitable lines or even keep existing clients happy. Earlier we mentioned uncertainty and anxiety among staff, especially around their future and jobs, but this anxiety also applies to customers, especially SMEs who were relying on their insurance companies for any disruption in business continuity and felt they had adequate insurance in place. They now fear they will lose everything they have worked for over the years. In most cases, the insurers haven't even been proactive in communicating to them. The biggest challenge the pandemic brings is disruption to business and operational continuity. Many insurers had business preparedness and contingency planning in place, but that didn't work for a crisis of this scale. The insurers had to swiftly reprioritize operations, modify their processes, and redesign workflows to continue their business going. To ease operational pressures, non-critical areas of the businesses had to be temporarily stalled. Even the critical services like claims processing was slow, and overall the insurers struggled to stay on top. Add to that supply chain failures. With the regional lockdowns simultaneously in many places and in many countries, there were transit issues. Not enough mobile devices were available. The transportation of physical goods took a toll. In case of insurers, the supply chains were broken or partially broken with agents. The physical surveying of sites became impossible for surveyors. The workflow for the underwriters and loss adjusters had to go virtual overnight. Given that, lockdowns, remote working and social distancing are still at play and expected in some form until next year, the pressure on insurers is on 5 main fronts. According to initial estimates from various insurance bodies, the estimates of claims will run into $100 billion globally. Although most businesses will not be covered against COVID-19, some covered will run into significant sums like the Tokyo Olympics, estimated $2 billion, and other large events which generally purchase communicable disease coverage. The rest of the claims are made up of business interruption claims, travel insurance, events cancellations, especially school and business trips, and other functions like weddings. Additionally, significant sums are expected to be paid for earlier storms. With a number of sites closed or operating on a skeleton scale, the bills still pile up on empty offices and its running costs. Add to this the outgoing payments on royalties to agents, payments on completed policies, etc., and paying a large scale of unproductive staff stuck at home, and the costs run up very fast. Therefore, managing profitability is becoming a struggle. The triple jeopardy is from high claims to low returns from investments, and maybe even the so-called phantom capital issues to paying huge ongoing running operations bills. We may be looking at investment losses around $100 billion as well, and therefore a number of solvency and closures in the not-so-long term. This will be especially if the insurers are not making significant sales using the online and other digital channels. As more and more claims are rejected around business interruption, clients are demanding action on the ambiguity of policies and rejections of claims. This in turn is creating a lot of unpleasantness and negativity for the insurance sector. Governments are asking insurers to be more flexible, and there are a number of significant class action lawsuits being filed. Even regulators might have their say. Thus, the need of the hour is transparency and straightforwardness. The pressure on the IT infrastructure to cope with scaling and the demand on IT has been unprecedented. There are reports of over 200% rise in calls to the call centers having to cope with extremely high demand on skeleton staff, with safety and social distancing, and this is far worse with companies that still have legacy infrastructure in place. Companies that have explored digital transformation and have moved to clouds and explored automated pilots have coped much better. Add to this the need to scale for remote working and support IT staff needed. These problems are compounded for insurers that still have agents deploying legacy infrastructure who are not inclined to change. Thus, the need of the hour is temporarily moving away from cost reductions to ensure survival. The pandemic has temporarily shifted business focus towards business continuity and business resiliency, not just for insurers but for all businesses. Before the pandemic, the insurers were investing into technologies like cloud to consolidate and migrate core processes, like claims, billing, policy, etc., to attain agility, reduce costs, and to use data more effectively. The focus has to be in providing the best customer experience to enable profitability again. Optimizing workforce and resiliency planning are becoming the pillars of execution. So the need of the hour is to focus on business viability, survival, to focus on how to bring continuity to the business and be profitable again. Focus on modifying business processes and redesigning of operations to reflect the current opportunities before adapting to the new normal. A longer-term view also needs to be reflected into any resilient plan for similar adversities. Focus on optimizing workforce, human and digital, to stay agile. Bring in the investments that you may have already made in digital technologies and in ecosystem partners and use them to your advantage in the current situation. Several technologies and ways of working helped overcome the current crisis. The pandemic pushed organizations to work in very different ways. The insurers had to integrate business and technology to respond flexibly, effectively, and frictionlessly. Insurers who had already invested in cloud fared the best in battling the crisis. Insurers utilized cloud and VoIP services to scale up key technologies needed for remote workers and remote applications. Those using public cloud platforms or hybrid clouds did it very fast. Those who used on-prem or legacy infrastructure found it difficult to scale out to a multitude of remote working options and had to limit the number of users at any one time. The elasticity of cloud ensured continuity of operations at scale. They could also serve their customers better, which was an added advantage over competitors. Adding automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning was another crucial component in handling the demand for answers from clients. Automation of processes helped businesses with continuity when human-driven processes fell short, when a number of employees were not available for whatever reason, when in quarantine, shielding, or not well. Typically done via RPA solutions, RPA-driven bots carried out bulk of customer response in the call centers, handling a significant increase in call volumes. The current crisis is successfully being overcome by human-machine collaborations. We believe it will form the foundation for more intelligent automation adoption in the future. Video conferencing and remote gateways helped companies to ensure regular touchpoints for work, for proactive meetings, and most importantly for engaging collaborations to a point where staff complained of video exhaustion. Finally, HR departments that responded fast and were able to see the significance of what was happening put in flexible contracts to handle all eventualities to make sure staff were not fired but optimized to the current requirements. On a positive note, the insurers and the industry have adapted extremely quickly to the change required. For a conservative and cautious industry, this pace of adaptation seems like a miracle. But as Darwin says, it is not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. Most employees seem satisfied with the way companies provisioned remote working and employee interaction. This will have to be enhanced into the new normal. For companies that were on their digital journey or piloting projects, the technology paid for itself and brought the dividend of responding faster to clients and managing operations effectively. The key factor emerging is that companies that had started their digital transformation and had developed numerous digital channels and ecosystems fared much better than the laggards still relying on legacy infrastructure. We have seen cases where the digital-influenced insurers are seeing more demand and growing at double-digit growth rates, whilst those not so influenced have struggled and are closing many lines of business and are looking at collapsing profits. So the key lesson is one of adapting to new technology and being able to both scale up in certain places and scale down in others, mostly enabled by cloud technology. Added to this automation, namely RPA and AI and ML, to cope with the demands from call center automation and flexibility in process workflows to collapse and enable more digitization of processes, has made a big difference for companies to cope better. Collaboration technology has been a godsend and enabled numerous meetings and faster decisions being taken. COVID-19 has pushed organizations to operate very differently. The insurers need to integrate business and IT skill sets. How effectively and frictionlessly an organization can use technology to fulfill business operations will drive the success in current times. We have already seen what has worked so far. Here, I would like to focus on the way forward. We already saw how various technologies came to the rescue in the challenging times. We believe ongoing digital transformation directives will continue to help insurers in being more resilient. Think out of the box, for innovative flexible policies, new revenue models, and new opportunities around business contingencies and continuity. Machine learning, NLP, computer vision, and other AI technologies can help insurers to be predictive and proactive. Gradual progression of automation is the key here. Adapt processes, redesign, collapse, consolidate, collaborate them as short-term solutions amid the crisis and to support the overall organizational resilience. Collapse manual workflows to suit social distancing measures. Customer-facing processes like claims should be made self-serve to make it faster. Consider updating models for faster settlements and consider updating limits for claims handlers and loss adjusters so that customers can be served faster. Customize and make the client experience pleasurable. The immediate focus has shifted from lowering costs using technology to survival and continuity. However, just blind spending on technology, licenses, and all staff needs will not bring the desired results. Justification and planning need to be associated with longer-term transformation, and this should have an eye on reducing cost in the digital era. Employee management and optimization is key. The insurers will need to act with flexibility and empathy to adhere to the rules of the coming new normal that safeguard their employees, customers, and partners. Engage in resource planning based on the availability and capability of employees to sustain and manage capacity and demands in the coming months. Consider moving them from non-critical processes to critical ones. The biggest lesson is that digital transformation is a key differentiator and key for surviving the challenges. Companies on their journey with new technologies and digital channels are staying profitable and investing more to prepare for any type of future normalization.